The game is like any other business. You can run it like any other business, just like corporate America. You can run it the same way.
In the last year, 120 have been killed as Maria Licciardi fights for control of the underworld.
Female gangsters have been too overlooked, but the thing about them is when they step in, they take over totally. From Stephanie Street Clair running the Harlem underworld in the 90s.
Back then, Harlem was a man's world. So for a woman to decide that she was going to be the boss was not heard of.
To Thelma Wright being the boss lady of Philly, as well as the narco queen herself, Griselda Blanco, the woman that inspired Pablo Escobar.
She was the largest cocaine importer at the time.
My mother would walk into the room and you could feel her power. And then in one moment, all that power could be gone.
Female gangsters were definitely not to be messed with, as the men who made the mistake learned the hard way, 6 feet deep or less, with these women going on to take over the reins. These are interesting women with interesting stories. Let's dive right in. First up, we have Ma Barker. She is often seen as a cigar-smoking, ruthless mastermind behind her son's crime spree during the Great Depression, but the truth is way murkier.
Ma Barker was notorious back in the 30s when she met her demise.
Born Arizona Donnie Clark in 1873, she was just a small-town Missouri girl before history cast her as the queen of crime. She married George Barker and had 4 sons, Herman, Lloyd, Arthur, and Fred, all of whom turned to crime.
Barker family moved to Oklahoma and spent many years in Oklahoma, and her sons got involved in crime.
George, not exactly cut out for the outlaw life, eventually disappeared from the picture, leaving Ma and her boys to fend for themselves. The Barker gang pulled off bank robberies, kidnappings, and shootouts through the 1920s and 30s, but was Ma really calling the shots? The FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover, painted her as the gang's criminal mastermind, but historians argue she was more of a fiercely loyal mother who looked the other way. Some even claim she didn't know how to fire a gun. The evil genius narrative may have just been an easy way for the FBI to justify what happened next. In 1935, the FBI tracked Ma and her son Fred to a hideout in Ocklawaha, Florida. They surrounded the house, demanded their surrender, and when that didn't happen, a brutal shootout erupted. After hours of gunfire, Ma and Fred were found dead.
She ends up, along with one of her sons, getting gunned down in a house in Florida by the FBI.
The FBI claimed Ma had a machine gun around her at the time.
This is a 100-shot machine gun used by Ma Barker against a federal man in the raid.
So was Ma Barker a criminal mastermind or just an enabler? The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. She may not have been planning the crimes, but she wasn't exactly discouraging them either. Regardless, her name is forever linked to America's golden age of outlaws, proving that, true or not, gangsters have a way of sticking around. Then, Thelma Wright.
The game is like any other business. You can run it like any other business, just like corporate America. You can run it the same way.
Thelma Wright wasn't just a mob wife sitting pretty while her husband ran things when tragedy struck. She took over, turning loss into power and running a D-empire like a true boss. Born in 1951 in Philadelphia, Thelma had a normal upbringing, Catholic school, good grades, a future far from crime. But love has a way of rewriting destinies. In the 1970s, she met Jackie Wright, a major heroin player tied to the ruthless black mafia. Life was good money, power, luxury. But in 1986, everything changed when Jackie was murdered.
They talked to me very nicely. Okay, your husband, we just found your husband's body in there. Tell us where you've been. And I explained to them that I was in California. I talked to him on Thursday morning, but he had been missing. I hadn't heard from him anymore.
Most would have walked away. Thelma, she stepped up. Using the connections Jackie left behind, she took over the business, building a heroin and cocaine pipeline from Los Angeles to Philly. Smart, strategic, and fearless, she handled millions, proving that a woman could run the game just as well, if not better, than men.
Most people think the game is just all about us men, you know what I mean? From my knowledge, not too many women played at a very high level. Thelma ventured out pretty far, pretty deep.
But success in the D world comes with a price. Rivals wanted her dead, the law was circling, and violence was already everywhere.
Someone grabs me and pulls me down behind a trash dumpster. And I go to move, and the guy's standing there with the shotgun to my head. I don't see his face, I just see the 2 barrels.
Despite all the wealth and power, Thelma saw where the road led prison or death, and unlike so many before her, she made a move that shocked everyone. She walked away. By the early 90s, she left the game for good. No arrests, no tragic downfall, just a clean exit. She reinvented herself, wrote a book with eyes from both sides, and dedicated her life to warning others about the dangers of fast money and crime. Next up, we have Griselda Blanco, the Black Widow, the cocaine godmother, the queen of narco terror. She was a gangster in a league of her own.
That's when Griselda Blanco emerged. She was the largest cocaine importer at the time.
My mother would walk into the room and you could feel her power. And then in one moment, all that power could be gone.
Born in 1943 in Cartagena, Colombia, she didn't come from a wealth or power, she came from the streets. Raised in Medellin, she was picking pockets and running scams as a child, and by 11, she had allegedly kidnapped and murdered a boy.
This was another level of killing that cannot be explained by anything, I think, in her background. I think it's something in her soul.
By her teens, she was already deep in the underworld, but it wasn't petty crime that made her infamous, it was cocaine. In the 1970s, Griselda moved to New York and built one of the first major networks between Colombia and the US. Before Pablo Escobar became a household name, she was smuggling hundreds of kilos of cocaine, flooding the streets, and making millions.
One of the most feared narcotics, homicidal maniacs that we've ever encountered.
She pioneered the use of mules, sending women, sometimes models and housewives, across borders with D's hidden in custom-made lingerie. And when it came to taking out her enemies, she changed the game, introducing motorcycle assassins who would pull up, execute their target, and disappear in seconds. By the early 80s, she had relocated to Miami, turning the city into a battlefield. The cocaine trade was booming, and so was the violence.
Bravo and Blanco are this perfect partnership. And they're in the right place at the right time with the right product.
She went to war with rivals, reportedly ordering over 200 murders, including that of a rival's 2-year-old son. A crime so brutal, even cartel bosses were shocked, but no one stays on top forever. In 1985, the DEA finally caught up with her in California. She was sentenced to over a decade in prison, but even behind bars, she held power. By 2004, she was released and deported back to Colombia, having outlived Escobar and walked free, a living legend, but karma doesn't forget. In 2012, as she left a butcher shop in Medellin, a gunman on a motorcycle pulled up and shot her twice in the head, an ironic end for the woman who had revolutionized cartel kings. Griselda Blanco wasn't just a D queen, she built the cocaine empire and set the blueprint for modern cartels. Love her or fear her, she was the first true queen of cocaine. Next, Maria Licciardi, La Madrina, the godmother of Naples, wasn't just another mob boss. She was a mastermind, turning the chaotic Camorra into a structured multi-million-dollar empire.
Esattamente come il manager di un'industria, di una multinazionale, cerca di trovare sempre la soluzione che attragga di meno l'attenzione delle forze dell'ordine.
Born in 1951 in Naples, Maria was Camorra royalty from day one. Her family was deeply embedded in the underworld, and by the 1990s, after brutal gang wars left the syndicate in pieces, she did the unthinkable. She took over. But she wasn't just another violent boss. Maria ran the Camorra like a corporation, bringing order, making alliances, and expanding business in ways no one had before. Under her rule, the Camorra became richer, stronger, and far more dangerous.
In the last year, 120 have been killed as Maria Licciardi fights for control of the underworld.
Her biggest power moves, turning Naples into a major heroin and cocaine hub, working with South American cartels, running a massive human operation that made millions, eliminating rivals quietly, no flashy violence, just disappearances.
Licciardi is as brutal as her male counterparts.
She was nearly untouchable, but then she made a fatal misstep. She allowed the of underage girls for prostitution.
When they arrive, they become the Camorra's property and are forced into prostitution.
Even in the brutal world of organized crime, that was a step too far. Public outrage exploded and law enforcement made her their top target. In 2001, after years on the run, Maria was finally arrested in Naples, but prison didn't break her. After her release in 2009, rumors swirled that she slipped right back into power, running things from the shadows. Then in 2021, as she tried to board a plane in Rome, she was arrested again, this time for continuing her criminal empire while expanding into construction and finance. Maria Licciardi proved that the underworld isn't just about brute force, it's about strategy, intelligence, and knowing exactly when to strike. She didn't just survive in a world of men, she outplayed them all. Then there's Stephanie Street. Clair, better known as the Madame Queen of Harlem, wasn't your typical crime boss. She wasn't a ruthless killer or some power-hungry sociopath. No, she was something even rarer. A brilliant, fearless woman who built her own empire in a world ruled by men. She was a gangster, sure, but more than that, she was a strategist, a rebel, and a self-made queen.
She had class, she had style, and she was tough.
Born in the late 1800s in Guadeloupe, she immigrated to the US in the early 1900s, eventually making Harlem her home. The neighborhood was thriving during the Harlem Renaissance, but it was also filled with crime, corruption, and racism. Stephanie saw an opportunity and took it.
Miss Sinclair was gangster. She had the attitude and the servitude to say, this is what I believe in, this is what I'm gonna stand up for. She kept it real.
In the 1920s, Harlem's underground economy revolved around the numbers game, an illegal lottery where small bets could lead to big paydays. But the real money, that went to the people running the game. Stephanie, using her sharp business sense, built one of the most powerful numbers rackets in Harlem. Soon she was dripping in diamonds, wrapped in furs, and living in luxury.
Now, we don't know how she managed to save $10,000 from 1912 to 1922, but indeed she did.
Back then, Harlem was a man's world. So for a woman to decide that she was going to be the boss was not heard of. And so I'm sure everyone in Harlem at that time was kind of like, what is she?
But she wasn't just about wealth, she was about power. When Dutch Schultz, a violent mobster, tried to take over Harlem's numbers game in the 30s, most operators either surrendered or got taken out. Not St. Clair, she fought back, tipping off police about Schultz's operations, bribing officials, and even sending out hits on his men. Schultz wanted her gone, but before he could act, he was assassinated by his own mafia bosses in 1935. With Schultz dead, the Italian mob, led by Lucky Luciano, took over. St. Clair, always thinking ahead, aligned herself with Bumpy Johnson, ensuring Harlem's black community still had influence. Beyond crime, she was an activist, using her wealth to fight police brutality and corruption. She funded programs, called out crooked cops in newspaper ads, and pushed for Harlem's black residents to demand their rights.
She was in your face when it came to confronting the power structure. She had to have a pretty deep analysis of oppression from the perspective of blacks in America.
By the time she died in 1969, she had left crime behind and was seen as a legend. Stephanie Street Clair wasn't just a gangster, she was a queen who played by her own rules and won. Up next, Anna Genovese. Anna wasn't just a mafia wife, she was a powerhouse who played the game, made her fortune, and then did the unthinkable. She broke the mob's code of silence and lived to tell the tale. Married to Vito Genovese, one of the most feared mafia bosses of the 20th century, Anna wasn't content to sit in the shadows. She managed Greenwich Village nightclubs, including the legendary Club 82, an underground haven for drag performers and LGBTQ+ nightlife.
Here we are at Club 82. This is a picture of everybody there. Once again, everybody who looks female is male. Everybody who looks male is female, with one exception, and there's Anna right at...
Long before it was common, she carved out a space where the queer community could thrive, all while handling business in the male-dominated world of organized crime. But her marriage? A disaster. Vito was violent, controlling, and ruthless. And by the 1950s, Anna had had enough. In a move that no one saw coming, she became the first mafia wife to break omertà, the mob's sacred code of silence. During their messy 1953 divorce battle, Anna took the stand and spilled secrets no one was supposed to say out loud. She exposed the mafia's illegal gambling empire, money laundering schemes, and hidden assets, laying out how Vito and his associates raked in millions. It was a direct betrayal, one that, under normal circumstances, would have been a death sentence. But Anna survived. Some say it was her powerful connections, others believe Vito, already drowning in legal trouble, couldn't risk having her killed. Either way, she outlived him. While Vito died in prison in 1969, Anna faded into quiet obscurity, living life on her own terms. She wasn't a victim, and she wasn't just someone's wife. Anna Genovese played the game, made her fortune, and when it no longer served her, she burned it all down. One thing is for sure, she was never the kind of woman to go quietly, but this next female is kind of the opposite of Anna. She moved quietly, but she meant business. Nanny Doss, better known as the Giggling Granny.
Well, I spent it for life. Would you ever get out?
Oh.
She seemed like your typical sweet old lady, but behind that cheerful smile was a cold-blooded serial killer who poisoned her way through multiple husbands and a few unlucky family members. Born Nancy Hazel in Alabama in 1905, Nanny had a rough start. Her strict, controlling father cut her education short, and at 7 she suffered a head injury in a train accident. Something some believe may have flipped a switch in her brain. Growing up, she obsessed over romance novels and Lonely Hearts columns, dreaming of perfect love, but real life turned out to be much darker. Her first husband, Charlie, was in a drunk. When 2 of their kids mysteriously died from food poisoning, Charlie got suspicious and took off with one of the surviving children, leaving one with Nanny.
Things only got worse when in early 1927, 2 of their daughters unexpectedly died from suspected food poisoning. Charlie accused Nanny of poisoning the girls and fled with their firstborn daughter, leaving behind their newborn in Nanny's care.
He was the only husband to escape with his life. The rest weren't so lucky. Frank's second husband thought he had found a devoted wife until he raped Nanny one drunken night. Soon after, she served him a special drink laced with rat poison. Arlie, another alcoholic, dropped dead from heart failure, buisuin, but really, it was Nanny's signature poison at work. She even burned down their house for insurance money. Richard, a womanizer, didn't last long either, but before she got to him, she took a detour and killed her own mother.
Nanny began plotting her kill until her plans were put to a sudden stop when her elderly mother decided to move in. Unable to kill without getting caught, she took extra precautions, but eventually had no choice but to poison her.
Finally, Samuel, a religious and respectable man, tried to curb Nanny's love of romance novels. Big mistake. She poisoned him with a prune cake, and this time, doctors caught on. Arrested in 1955, Nanny confessed while giggling and joking as if it were all a big joke.
She only eventually admitted her guilt when being told that she would get her Romantic Hearts magazines back, saying, "I only wanted to find the perfect mate," which is eerie. She eventually confessed to also killing her mother, her sister, her grandson, and her mother-in-law.
Sentenced to life in prison.
All the time I killed my husband.
Which, your last husband?
Yes.
Did they say you killed any more?
Yes.
There's your other husband? Which other?
3 of them.
She kept her eerie sense of humor until her death in 1965, proving that sometimes the most dangerous people hide behind the warmest smiles.
Nanny Doss died of leukemia in the hospital ward of the Oklahoma State Penitentiary on June 2nd, 1965, at the age of 59.
Ruth Eisemann-Schier might not be as famous as Griselda Blanco, but she has a unique claim to infamy. She was the first woman to ever land on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Born in 1942 in Honduras, Ruth wasn't a career criminal. She was smart, educated, and had studied in Mexico and the US, but then she met Gary Chris, a man with big ideas, big greed, and no morals and love. Well, it has a way of making people do crazy things. In December of 1968, Ruth and Gary carried out one of the most shocking kidnappings in American history. They snatched 20-year-old Barbara Mackel, the daughter of a wealthy Florida land developer, and buried her alive in a specially designed underground box.
It's been a long and a tense day here at the Roadway Inn near Decatur. Everyone has been waiting all day. Newsmen have been waiting to find out some details about the kidnapping of Barbara Jane Mackel.
The box had air tubes, food, and water meant to keep her alive while they demanded a $500,000 ransom. The plan worked. Barbara's father paid up, but Ruth and Gary weren't exactly criminal masterminds when it came to escaping. Gary was caught almost immediately, but Ruth, she disappeared. She changed her identity, blended into new communities, and managed to stay on the run for 79 days. Long enough to make history, that kind of history. Her luck finally ran out in March 1969 when the FBI found her in Norman, Oklahoma, working under a fake name. She was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 7 years, but served only 4 before being deported to Honduras. Barbara Mackel survived her terrifying ordeal and lived a normal life. Gary Christie somehow got pardoned, became a doctor, and because karma has a sense of humor, was later arrested again for smuggling DC's. Ruth wasn't a lifelong criminal, or a violent mastermind, just an educated woman who got tangled up in a reckless, high-stakes crime. But one thing's for sure, she made history, proving that when it comes to crime, women can be just as bold, daring, and infamous as the men. Up next, Margot Freshwater. Margot Freshwater was just 18 when she got tangled up with Glenn Nash, a shady 40-year-old lawyer with a dark side. What started as a legal case turned into a full-blown crime spree, with Margot caught in the middle. Their biggest crime? A Memphis liquor store robbery gone horribly wrong. On December 6, 1966, store owner Hillman Robbins Sr. was shot 5 times in the head. Margot swore she never pulled the trigger. Witnesses said she was involved. In an unexpected turn, Glenn Nash was declared mentally unfit for trial, leaving Margot to take the fall alone. At 19, she was convicted of first-degree murder and handed a 99-year sentence, but she wasn't about to spend the rest of her life behind bars. In 1970, after just 3 years in prison, Margot pulled off a legendary escape. She and another inmate simply walked out of the Tennessee prison during a moment of confusion. While authorities scrambled, she disappeared, and for over 30 years, she lived a completely new life. Margot didn't hide in some far-off country. She blended right in, settling in Columbus, Ohio, under the name Tanya Hughes. She got married, raised a family, and lived a quiet suburban life. No one, her husband, kids, or neighbors knew the truth. For 3 decades, she stayed under the radar.
Margot would be on the run for 32 years, only to be discovered as a grandmother of 7 with 2 children in Idaho.
Then one mistake exposed her past. In 2002, advances in criminal databases uncovered Margot's secret. She was arrested and extradited to Tennessee, finally facing justice. Instead of a retrial, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to time served. After just 6 more months in prison, she walked free, this time for good.
After she escaped and 32 years on the run, she was placed back in prison in 2002, only serving time until she was released in 2011.
Next we have Belle Starr, the bandit queen. She was the pistol-packing outlaw who rode through history draped in velvet and lace, feared by some, admired by others, and forever wrapped in the mythos of the Wild West. Born Myra Maybelle Shirley in 1848, she came from a well-off Missouri family, but the Civil War shattered that life, pushing her toward crime and outlaws. As a teen, she ran with infamous gunslingers like Jesse James and the Younger Brothers, but it was her marriage to outlaw Jim Reed that truly set her on the path to infamy. When Jim was killed in 1874, Belle didn't settle down, she doubled down, later marrying Cherokee outlaw Sam Starr and running with a gang of horse thieves and gunfighters in Indian Territory. What made Belle truly legendary wasn't just her crimes, but her style. She rode side saddle in fancy hats and tailored dresses, carried 2 Colt revolvers, and held her own in a world dominated by men. Accused of harboring fugitives and fencing stolen horses, she avoided capture for years, but in 1883, she and Sam were finally arrested for horse theft. A serious crime in the West, but Belle, always defiant, served her 1-year sentence with poise, dressing in elegant gowns even behind bars. After prison, she tried to keep a lower profile, but trouble followed. Sam was killed in a gunfight in 1886, leaving Belle vulnerable in a world where loyalty was fleeting. Then on February 3rd, 1889, just before her 41st birthday, she was ambushed and shot in the back near her ranch. The killer, whoever they were, made sure she was dead with a final close-range shot. Her murderer remains a mystery. Some say a rival, a vengeful gang member, or even her own son. But one thing is certain. Belle Starr lived fast, died violently, and became an outlaw legend, proving the Wild West wasn't just for men. Lastly, Ching Shih. If we're talking about women who ruled with absolute power, Ching Shih, the pirate queen of the South China Sea, was in a league of her own. Born in 1775 in Guangdong, China, she started out as a prostitute in a floating brothel, but fate had bigger plans. In 1701, she married Chung Wen, a feared pirate who commanded the mighty Red Flag Fleet. Most wives in her position would have stayed in the background, but not Ching Shih. When her husband mysteriously died in 1807, she didn't just take over, she made history. Instead of letting the fleet crumble, she transformed it into the most powerful pirate empire ever. She united rival pirate factions under her rule. She enforced strict laws, disobedience meant execution, and even commanded over 1,800 ships and 70,000 pirates, outmatching some entire navies. At her peak, she dominated the South China Sea, raiding villages, imposing tolls, and even defeating imperial forces. Her code was ruthless but effective. No harming female captives, break this rule, and you die. Steal from the fleet's loot, beheading, betray the crew, expect a brutal execution. Her leadership was so strong that even the Qing dynasty, the Portuguese Navy, and the British Empire failed to stop her. By 1810, China was desperate to take her down, but instead of going out in a blaze of glory, Ching Shih did the impossible. She negotiated a full pardon, kept her fortune, and even secured a noble title. She retired wealthy, respected, and completely untouchable, living out her days in luxury, something no pirate before or after ever managed. Ching Shih wasn't just a pirate, she was one of history's greatest criminal masterminds, proving that true power is not about strength alone, but strategy, intelligence, and knowing exactly when to strike.